All right, we've got all of our strips. Our strips are all stacked right here. And as you can see, they are all cut, just ready to sew together. And because we turned them, you can see that the nap is going the same direction. So as any other bias strip, we are just going to overlap them. And this tells you exactly where your little seam allowance is going to be. So there we go. So we're going to sew all of these together, and then we'll put the quilt together. Now, just in case you didn't remember to turn your things upside down and you wanted them to be in the right order, I did figure out that if this one was wrong and I had to turn it over to make it work, if I overlap them just that far, turn that upside down, and cut it right on that line, then that would give me the angle going the other direction. And then I could again turn it and sew it. So either way will work to make that come together. Okay, so we'll continue sewing these together, and then we're going to go back and sew it around the quilt. All right. When I sew the binding on, I like to start in about 6 or 8 inches. And so I leave that free so that when we come around, I can finish that tail. Now I like a small 1/2 inch. That's a little bigger than a 3/8 inch seam allowance. The 3/8 isn't quite big enough, but the 1/2 is just a little tight. I like to have enough that I can bring the binding around and have the batting go clear to the very end, but still have enough to fold under the end when it wraps. So we're going to work on a large 3/8 or a small 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're going to sew around here to the corner, and then we'll show how to go around it. Right, now as you... Okay, you're going to sew into about 3/8 of an inch before the end of the batting, right to here. So we're going to do that. And then lift up the needle. And we're going to get a perfect corner right here. So the easiest way to find that corner, this little angle, is to fold it. So these edges are even with these edges right to the edge here. So when I lay this down, I am level here and I'm square here. So this whole corner is square and this point is right to here. Now I'm going to start sewing right here where I stopped sewing, but I'm going to start sewing right on the outside edge. But that's to get your point mitered just the way you want. You need to come back and start sewing right where that was. So kind of pay attention to where, as you go to start sewing, that you are about that same seam allowance where you stopped. Get your right flat. Now you can use your walking foot for this part as well, or you can use your regular foot. Now you can see I've got my little pleat where it came out just right there. So now when I go to turn this, if I'm going to come and sew around the other way, I just fold this over. And you want to be sure you push it out so that it's flat, so that it fills out right to the edge. And so you can see how that's going to make a nice square mitered corner. So when you come back and you're sewing back around it, you can see that as you fold this under, and then I'm going to, we're just going to sew this corner. So now I've got my little edge tucked under, and when I sew this, when I top stitch the binding down, I like to put this fold just a hair over my stitching line. I don't want my stitching line to show when under my binding. So I put it just a little bit to the edge. Now I like to use it's called a serpentine stitch. Most sewing machines have one on it. It's just a zigzag that's rounded. It isn't a sharp zigzag. You could use a regular zigzag stitch. I like this one because it takes little stitches and it holds it really tight. Lots of people like to use just a straight edge stitch when they bind like this, but the Minkee is so slick that it's hard to make it look really flat, and anything with that much nap in it, it's hard to make it look really pretty. So if you use this little serpentine stitch, it's very forgiving and nobody can tell if it's not straight. Now as I come into this edge, you can see I have my edge turned under, and I have to turn it under clear to the edge. So I've got a little pucker here for a minute, and I stitch right past the seam. Not too far in, but past the stitching line, so that when I turn it, it's going to be, I'm going to have a sharp edge. And then as I fold this over, you can see how this just folds right into place. Now, you need to be sure, there we go, you get that flat so you don't end up with a big pooch here. And then I start right on top of the fold when I start. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but as I'm sewing this, I'm pulling this through, and it's okay. My pressure, I've raised the pressure on my machine, so this is not really hard down tight. I've raised it up to where it's almost to zero. But it still puts quite a bit of pressure on here, and it doesn't just sew through easy because of its thickness. So I just pull it through, and it works great. You'll be able to adjust your own machine. You'll be able to kind of play with it and see what your machine can do. But just be sure that you kind of pull, but not too hard, not too fast, but enough that you can keep your stitches consistent. So now you can see that that corner is tight and flat. I'm going to come back and trim these little loopies off. We have a pretty nice square corner, considering it was thick Minkee.